Hi, let's talk tomahawks. Okay, so a lot of times in Pikiti we talk about how, it's kind of this universal platform, how we do all, stick and knife and empty hand are all the same thing. And that's true to a point. Each subsystem, you have to sort of, learn its particular quirks to maximize the effectiveness of that subsystem. That's the only way it works. Knife is not the same thing as empty hand. They might have overlap, but they're not the same thing. And that's very true of when we look at the translations between tomahawk and a blade. Okay, so if we have these as comparisons, they're very different animals, and you can't treat them the same if you want to maximize the effectiveness of these weapons. So let's talk about what's different about a tomahawk. Okay, this is a cold steel tomahawk. I bought this thing like 10 years ago. I don't remember what make it is, and because I wanted to be able to get a sparring implement, I've blunted it so it is not sharp. I could still absolutely kill someone with this really easily because all the weight is up here in the head. There's no doubt in my mind that this thing, hits like a ton of bricks, way harder than any piece of rattan that that I spar with. And one of the problems with any of these is it becomes really hard to figure out, well, how am I going to pressure test my stuff if none of your training tools mimic what this thing does. Okay, this is a cold steel training tomahawk. I've cut the back spike off because that back spike scares the hell out of me, and I don't want anybody to hit me with it. So I've cut them off of all of mine, and now I have this kind of Viking-ish looking thing. If we look at the comparison, my actual hawk the handle's a little bit longer, makes it a nice fighting blade. This is a pretty light head, and one of the things I really like about this, one, they're cheap. Two, that's a pretty good example of a historic fighting hawk. A lot of these modern tactical versions are over heavy for weight. They're steel all the way through the haft, and so you're getting all this extra weight down here that you really don't need, right? So with a hawk, you want your target in the head, and everything else is kind of extraneous as long as it's not going to blow up in your hand. You don't need a steel half on a tomahawk. That's just total freaking overkill. Nothing is easily going to break through the hickory on the shaft. Okay, anyway, what's different about this? So the cool thing is about tomahawks. Tomahawks are a great adaptation of a bunch of different principles in Pikiti. We have a long shaft that we're hitting with, right? We have a bladed edge. We have a hook that's equivalent to hooking in Pakal, so that I can reach out and grab something. I can reach out and grab something. And a lot of times, that's what people focus on when they're showing off, oh, look, I have a tomahawk or wasai, and I can do all these cool things, and you can. But the important thing on a hawk is to hit people really hard with this heavy end of it so you kill them, okay? And this thing is going to deliver devastating blows. If you don't actually own one, I'd encourage you to get one just so you can feel what this thing feels like in motion. Even some of the videos that I've done with these training hawks, they're not representative of the real hawk. I can do things with this thing that I absolutely struggle, at least at my current strength levels, to do. Okay, so you're going to see a lot more dedicated hits as I'm moving around here than I am this. I can feint a lot faster here than I can with this one. So you're going to see a lot more clears and fluid motion than broken motion that you might see with this or another lighter fighting weapon. Right? We look at these. Here I can jab, not so much, right? I might be able to go fluid and then come back with something, but I don't get my low dedication jab here that I can do with this. Not so much. This you'll see coming, it's a lot slower. All the weight's over here in the head. So I might do something, but it's not going to be not dedicated. And so that becomes really important. If I have these big weighted cuts, that makes me more open. So this is really where like espada y daga, or in this case, axe and dagger, might become important as I'm fighting and I'm using this to keep you off of me. Okay, and so this sword and knife, or tomahawk and knife, becomes a really interesting system of play as we're out here and doing different items. Okay, because this stops a person from crashing very easily, where this has opened me up to do so. Again, core first principle of any weapon is to hit the other guy with it, but preferably at long range without him being able to hit back. That's the number one emphasis on tomahawk. Okay, the next cool thing on tomahawk would be the hooking stuff. And usually the way I treat this is I miss because you crash in, I swing at your head and something happens, right? You missed the head, I've crashed in, I've ducked, I've blocked, and this didn't hit me, right? I stumbled in. My next job is to then hook into, and create connection between my weapon and be able to control the other person. There's a lot of cool things you can do with this. Again, the point is to hit someone really hard with it. Okay, so that's the focus on our sparring. Now, how do you hit someone hard with this? Okay, this is where really specialization into the different subsystems, in my opinion, comes into play. So if we are looking at sort of classic Pikiti, like, okay, so what's good form if I'm going to cut you with a Pikiti machete? So 90-degree principle, I'm keeping this sort of tight arc here with my weapon here. And in general, you know, that's pretty, well, why couldn't I duplicate that with the tomahawk? I can do that. I can cut here, looks good. Hey, no problem. If we're going to optimize for the weapon, I'd argue that that is flawed, okay? We are treating, the reason we are cutting the way we do with this tool is so we can get our cut. And if you want to do that, you can do that. I would argue that is not optimizing for this weapon, okay? What you're cutting with is that much of the blade. Because if you get to this much of the blade, you are going to hit and sink and hook rather than get your cut in and cut through. So this is slashing with it as you're coming through. And again, you have to be absolutely on. If you screw this up, you cut with this part, and yeah, that's I don't know if you can see that. Right? If you screw this up, then you cut with this part, you get your optimal cut, you know, you cut with this kind of blade edge, and I don't think anybody wants to get cut, you know, with 4 inches of steel moving fast. But if you get to this part, this is how far you sink of it, you just stuck that in the other person. And that seems like a pretty high likelihood, because nobody is like, oh, I'm only going to hit them with half my blade to secure the fact that I don't, you know, lose my weapon into their body. That's a really high chance. And if you fought with these, you know how this point catches on stuff, okay? Even on the training hawks, it will catch onto a glove, and which is exactly the same thing it's going to do in real life on a sharp weapon, right? This pokey bit is going to catch on things, which is all the cool stuff that we're trying to do with it, okay? So to me, to optimize the weapon, this is where your cast is going to go in. Why? The first and most important one is range. Okay, so this is edge of good 90-degree principle. Okay, that's getting my good cut in. With 90-degree principle, I am losing range. That's a big difference in range, right? You can see optimum range if I'm going to cast here, optimum range if I'm going to slice. I am out of range, right? That's a big difference. Let me, if I can, okay, so I'm going to use the very edge there. I haven't changed my grip, and this is good 90-degree principle, and that's a cast. That's a big difference in range. And if you're fighting, right, inches matter. That's a big freaking deal in terms of range differential there. You are risking your hand more when you cast out like that, because it leads the way versus here, okay? That is why Pikiti swings the way it does. But with this weapon in particular, not only am I getting a range advantage, I'm getting an impact advantage, okay? I am transferring all of this force into that target versus cutting it. And if I'm slicing with this weapon, that might be okay. But with this weapon, with a limited blade edge here, I want to utilize all of it, and I want to use that impact potential that this thing's got. Right? This can be a one-shot stopper. Of course, so can this. But I want to utilize that. And so when I do that, here, okay, again, this is dulled down. Not that I want to get hit with it, but okay, there's nothing sharp about this. So I'm going to use this against Tara. Not a particularly strong hit. Right? Not a big wind-up. That's coming. Okay, that's coming just a little. That's mostly wrist, a little bit of arm. No real body into it. That is a crap load of power. Okay. Again, if I'm actually going to load. Okay, I'm almost tipping that thing over. This is a crap load of power on this. You may argue you don't need that much power, and I agree you don't. But the point is that this weapon can just deliver crushing power, and it's really not matched at all of what I can do with this. And if I was to compare that, so now I'm going to do some slicing cuts on this, okay? And you're not going to, and honestly, you can't see the difference, right? This isn't a body. You're not going to see the difference, but you're going to be able to see the transference force, which is, of course, naturally the main thing I'm looking at. Okay, it cuts, but what you can't see from that video is that there's actually cuts in the tire from my impact. Okay, and that's a physical rebound. That's the straight percussive impact with a dull tomahawk here. That thing is really, really damaging, and between the range and everything else, that's what I want when I hit. I want to, and I mentioned burying this into the target. You may very well bury this weapon into the target. I don't think there's any way that you get away from that, in this particular item, if you're going to hit them at all. I don't think you can play the game where you're fighting with just this top piece. You might do a little bit of it. You may not, that mean naturally part of it, but if you're trying to deliver punishing force, this is the natural way to strike, in my opinion, as we come into it. So, hope that helped. I'm going to put on some sparring footage of this against stick and against saber to give it some of its characteristic differences. But in a quick little overview of why I teach tomahawk the way I do.